Hello and welcome. Thank you for listening. My name is Sarah Baumert. I'm a yoga teacher, Feldenkrais practitioner, and host of the Sarah B. Yoga podcast. The Sarah B. Yoga podcast and my practice, Body Matter, is an interdisciplinary learning space where we explore the many ways that movement can help facilitate body acceptance and awareness, reduce pain and stress, regulate the nervous system, and build strength and ease. My teaching plays with the synthesis of Feldenkrais Awareness Through Movement lessons, traditional yoga asana, creative imagery, breathing exercises, self-massage, and a compassionate mindset to help you feel a greater sense of ease and comfort in yourself. Sarah B. Yoga and Body Matter have a lot of other program offerings. These podcasts are just a taste of my teaching. Each week I teach a range of online classes, including a gentle yoga class, a level 2 class for more advanced students, and Feldenkrais classes with monthly themes, anatomy lessons, and Q&A sessions for more in-depth study. I have 2 new online series offerings for the fall. A Feldenkrais series titled Coming to Your Senses, an exploration of the spaces of the eyes, the mouth, jaw, ears, vocal and breathing apparatus. And my second course, Wakeful Body, the blending of yoga and Feldenkrais on Monday nights. As one student recently described Monday nights, that felt like I just gave myself a massage. So these fall classes will be a continuation of some fan favorite stretching sequences that incorporate bolsters and other props to enhance the poses. There is still plenty of time to join these courses live or via the course recordings. You can find more information about these offerings in the show notes. Okay, on to today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. Hello and welcome to the Sarah B. Yoga podcast. This podcast is an intersection of my yoga teaching and my training in the Feldenkrais method. Today's class was taught live as the intro class for my Feldenkrais walking series titled Walking from Your Spine. In today's podcast, you will first hear me introduce the class and how we will approach the subject of walking from a Feldenkrais perspective in this course. Next, there will be the 60-minute Feldenkrais Awareness Through Movement lesson. Okay, I hope you enjoy. Okay, welcome everyone. So today I'm going to share a lesson that introduces us to how the hip and shoulder joints relate to our center line or to our spine and how they coordinate for walking. So this is the intro class for the Feldenkrais walking series that begins this week. So the context for this series is to learn about how our limbs and our spine move in relation to each other. This overall coordination of our torso to our limbs, our head to our pelvis, our shoulders to our pelvis, our chest to our legs, these different relationships. And we will move into an inquiry of asking, when these relationships are harmonious, how does that affect the way we walk? And how does that affect our sense of ease in walking? So if you are new to Feldenkrais, Feldenkrais is an inquiry-based learning. It's not a rhetorical process of going through lessons or exercises and repeating the same thing. Repeating it 5 exercises that someone gives you. So that is not what I will do. I won't give the group exercises and say, here, do these every day and you will walk better. Because this is this group class setting and all of us have our own unique way of being, of moving, of walking. And so what this inquiry-based learning does is it helps you first to feel what it is that you do, how you organize your spine, how do you move your hips, how do you turn your shoulders, What are your biases? What are your historical patterns that maybe you want to shed a few of or change or find new ways of moving? So it's really an ongoing process. So in this series, I will break down the mechanics of walking a little bit, but it won't be our main focus of learning for this series. But we will spend some time taking some slow steps and noticing the mechanics of how the torso organizes on top of the pelvis and the legs. That won't really be our focus tonight. Tonight, we're going to start really simply with feeling the way that we sense our midline and how we can move our hips and our shoulders in relation to each other and to this midline. So if any of you are coming today because you maybe have a really specific question about your own walking or the mechanics of your own walking, I just invite you to stay very curious about how this experiential way of learning might be able to help you understand your question in a new way. And, if you do have a specific question or concern about your walking, this series will be helpful. I would also say some one-on-one attention can also be helpful, which you can inquire about that at another time or after the lesson. And during the lesson, it's most important that you can hear me well. I won't be demonstrating. So if there's ever a moment in the lesson where you're not clear about the directions, I would suggest you just continue to listen. You might pause and continue to listen because I often repeat the directions. And start by simply exploring what you think I mean. And always assume that you're doing the right thing, because what can happen is we can get into this place of, am I doing this right? I don't know. I can't really feel what she's asking me to feel. And so then we start to kind of move into this judgmental place. So I invite you to just feel as though you are the expert of your body, because you really are the expert of yourself, and just start to explore what you think I mean if you feel a little confused at any moment. I think that's all I want to say before we start this lesson. It's really great to have you all here. Make sure you have a good space to lie on the floor. Don't do that quite yet, though. Or if you are on the floor, please come to stand. Preferably stand off of your mat, or if you do have something squishy that you're lying on, stand on a more firm surface if you can find one, and you can face any direction in your room. Just letting your arms hang. And pretend there's not a screen. There's not a screen that you need to pay attention to. And take a moment to find your balance in standing. And when you do that, if you feel comfortable with it, then close your eyes. And you can notice when you go to find your balance, over which foot do you find a safer support? Are you able to detect any discrepancy between how you're supported by your right leg versus your left leg? Is one foot a little bit more tenuously connected to the ground, the other one more firmly or more stable feeling? And so then you can ask yourself, does this have anything to do with the midline of my body? When children are taught about the midline in math, it's described as the line on which you only have one of something. So you have one nose, you have one mouth, you have one sternum, you have one belly button, you have one pubic bone. And so imagine this line and just really try to notice where the line for you actually is. And if this midline continued all the way down between your legs to the floor, does it seem to fall closer to one foot than the other? So this involves using your imagination as well as your senses. You can notice the way that you sense the right side of yourself compared to the left side of yourself. Great. Now gently open your eyes and notice your breathing. And see the horizon line out in front of you. So you can imagine a horizon line. Keeping your feet planted, could you just begin to turn a little bit to look around yourself? So your head turning, your chest might turn, as if you wanted to follow that horizon line. And you turn in both directions. And the inquiry here is one direction of turning around yourself a little bit more coherent? Do you have the sense of coherency in the movement? More as you turn to the right, or maybe more as you turn to the left? Because in general, we tend to find that one side is more available, more cohesive in the way that we move. The other side might have a little bit of interference, like a little something's getting in the way. Maybe you turn one way and you feel the weight in your feet in a very particular way, and it's different as you turn the other direction. Or maybe on one side, as you turn, you feel that you get taller. And as you turn the other direction, maybe you feel like you shrink a little bit or you sink a little bit. So you're just noticing these qualities for yourself. Great. Now, whatever space you have in your room, just walk a little bit, eyes open. You might need to take a few steps, turn around. You're just using the space as best as you can. And very simply notice the rhythm of your walking, which again can be a little tricky if you don't have a big space to walk. You can sense, do you sink or fall more into one leg or foot? And is there another leg that you feel like you rise up over? So noticing the sense of the weight coming onto your right leg versus your left. Do you linger over one leg? Do you actually spend more time on one foot compared to the other? Does one leg feel more stable? And we're not trying to make it even. We're just observing. Now, the moment that the front foot, that foot that's stepping forward, the moment that it touches the ground, where's your chest? Do you turn your chest at all? Do you turn your head, your eyes, or are your head and eyes, maybe they're fixed on some point or they're kind of watching where you're going? Great. Okay, so just take that exploration of walking and bring yourself to the floor. Come and lie with the floor, your back on the floor. If you're comfortable, lie with your legs long, but if that's not so comfortable for you, you can absolutely have your knees bent and your feet standing. And come back to this idea of your midline. Let's sense it from behind for a moment. So if you imagine you could take your finger and trace the back of your spine, starting from the back of your head, and you trace down and you go down the back of the neck, down the spine between the shoulder blades. down to the lower back, all the way to the sacrum and the tail. And you sense that that midline continues down between your legs, all the way between your heels. And just listen now, in lying, which heel is closer to the midline? Is one thigh closer to the midline? It's interesting thing that happens as you follow the midline. Some people follow an objective midline that is really a straight line. And then they discover that, in fact, they're not symmetrical to the line because the line itself is absolutely straight in your imagination. So that's maybe what you did with the image that I gave you. Some people might create a kind of wiggly line, a line that keeps following the absolute center between the right and left of your body. Maybe there's a little zigzag at some point. So you might discover that the line itself is not straight in order to really continue to find the middle of you as it goes down. So you can just notice what you did. Enjoy the process of this. And just begin to shift your attention to the right side so you can experience the right side of your face, the right side of your neck, the way that your right side rests on the floor, your right arm, the right side of the back of your sacrum, down through your right leg. Listen to the sense of the right side of yourself. And then just come back from the right side and shift your attention to the left side. And you can listen to the difference in the experience of the left side of yourself. The left side of your face, the left shoulder, the left arm, the left side of your back, left side of your sacrum, the left leg, the way your left heel meets the floor. Some people may have completely different sense from one side to the other. And this could be even emotional. One side might feel more like it has more vitality. One side might feel like it really sinks. So you're just noticing for yourself. Good. Take a moment now to tune into the experience of your breath coming and going, listening to the rising and the falling of your chest, this inner space within your torso. And perhaps you can notice that there's a difference between the expansion on one side within your torso and the other side. So you notice whether it's easier to expand into the right side of your torso or into the left side of your torso. You might try breathing once into the right side, as if you could just breathe into the right side and experience the expansion and the elasticity of the movement in your right side. And then breathe into your left side and experience for yourself this elasticity or sense of availability to expand. And then just think that you're breathing into both sides, which you are, and take a moment and sense the relationship of your ribs on both sides moving relative to the floor. Which side of your back seems to participate more with the floor as you make the movement of inhaling and exhaling? So you notice the way you engage and interact with the surface you're on. And you might feel that one side feels more readily available to you, or the contact with the floor is more clear on one side. Good. Now take a moment and simply exhale, and then wait or pause just for a moment at the end of your exhale. And notice within yourself the very first moment you can detect the beginning of your inhalation, and see if you can sense where your inhalation begins. So you are pausing at the end of the exhale and becoming more and more sensitive to the initiation of movement for your inhale, the rising of your intention to inhale. And you just follow that intention very quietly and watch how it begins to prepare you for action to inhale. Wonderful. Now, if your eyes aren't closed, go ahead and close your eyes. And now imagine, instead of this midline, imagine that a plane is dropped from the ceiling down through the center of your body. You can imagine it's like you're lying on a stage, and a perfectly flat curtain is slowly lowered, and it magically passes right through the middle of you. So this curtain is the plane, and it perfectly bisects you into a right and a left. So build that image for yourself, and notice where your eyes lie relative to the plane. Take a moment and notice which eye is closer to the plane. And go ahead and roll your head just a little bit so that the eye that's farther from the plane comes a little bit closer to the plane. This is very small. The eye does not cross the plane, but you just roll your head so that the eye that was farther from this midline plane just starts to approach the plane. You just shorten the distance to the plane. You don't cross it though. That's right. And so you can do this a few times. You come to what feels like your neutral place, and you're imagining this plane or this very thin curtain. The eye that feels like it's farther from the plane, you gently roll so that it begins to approach the plane. Good. And now just gently roll your head a little right and a little left, sensing that you're bringing one eye just a little closer to the plane and then the other eye. But please do not cross the plane. Don't break the plane with the eye. Just bring one eye a little closer while the other eye comes a little farther away. So you're doing this with both eyes until you get some clearer idea of where the middle actually is. Paying attention to your experience of when you're actually in the middle, when the plane sits equal distant from the eyes. Good, great. Leave this alone, rest. So when we're walking, we're constantly navigating around this midline. And most of us actually spend a little bit more time on one side of the midline. So this lesson today will help us clarify what it is that you do, how you organize. So a lot of our questions are somewhat open-ended. and there's a lot to explore. Okay, so now you still have this image of the plane that bisects you into a right and a left, and take a moment and just bring your attention to that plane so that you are with a place within you that's not right and that's not left. And you sense that. And now sense your two shoulders. And you can think about the kind of front head of the upper arm bone or the front tip of the shoulder where the arm meets the clavicle. And notice which is closer to this midline plane. Is one closer? Is one farther away? It's okay if it's hard to sense. You can just choose one if it's hard to sense. But whichever shoulder is a little closer to the plane, could you leave it there? And slowly begin to lift the other shoulder, the one that's a little farther away, and bring it slowly into a position where it feels like it's absolutely equal distant from the plane as the other shoulder. So you use one shoulder as a benchmark, and then you slowly organize the other shoulder, the one that's farther away, and just lift it, roll it a little bit towards the plane. And then you bring it back to where it started, and you do this a few times. And as you do this, see if you can really pay attention to the details of your experience. What is it that tells you the distance is becoming equal? What's the muscular tone? What's the sensation of the weight of the back on the floor? That moment that indicates, oh, okay, now the shoulders are perfectly the same distance from this plane. Great. And now just let that rest. And the shoulder that was closer to the plane to begin with, so this is your other shoulder, the one you weren't just moving, could you start to move it a little bit away from the plane so that, again, you feel that the two shoulders become equal distant? And you can just gently notice if this turns your head at all, how your eyes organize or how your eyes are a part of this movement. Great. Okay, let that rest. Just let the arms come down to the floor alongside your body if they're not there. And if your legs are bent with your feet standing, could you lengthen your legs if that's comfortable for you? Take a moment to imagine your two legs as lines. So your spine, we sort of drew a line for the spine or this midline, and then you have these two legs coming from your hip joints all the way to your feet that are like just two lines. We're simplifying the structure for a moment. And in a very small way, could you begin to lengthen your left leg? So small, it doesn't lift away from the floor. It's almost as though you're moving the bones within the skin. And just see if you can get the sense that your left leg is lengthening a little bit away from your pelvis or a little bit away from your head. You're thinking of lengthening it right in the direction that it's pointing. You lengthen it, and then you let that go, and you repeat this a few times. Great. Now, if you can lengthen the left leg a little bit away from you, can you also shorten it into you? So keeping your left leg straight, keeping your knees straight, can you think of drawing the left leg a little bit more into you as though it shortens, it comes towards the hip joint? The line stays straight, the leg stays straight. It's almost like the leg is a stick. And just the bones moving inside the skin. The leg shortens, the left leg shortens a little into you. And listen as you shorten the leg into you. Each time you do that, what is the sense of connection through your spine? Does your spine know that something different's happening? Does this shortening or drawing of the leg into you, does it have an effect on your head? If your head were going to turn, now I'm not asking you to turn your head, to arbitrarily turn your head, but if you shorten your left leg into you a little bit, and if it were going to roll your head a little bit in one way, what do you sense? Where would it turn? Would it turn a little to the left towards that shortening leg? Or would it turn a little to the right away from that shortening leg? Great. Okay, let that pause for a moment. Come to a place now that's not right and not left, so it's the middle. Maybe you imagine the plane or you imagine the midline. Sense your two long legs again and bring your attention over to the right leg. Can you slowly start to shorten the right leg into you so the knee stays straight? You can almost imagine it's like a stick, or like if someone were at your right heel, sitting at your right heel, and they gave you a little bit of pressure through your heel, and you felt your femur bone move into the hip joint. How is that force then directed through your spine? And you do this a few times. So you shorten the leg, the right leg into you, and then you let it go. You're always welcome to take rests between these little explorations if you need more resting time. Then you repeat the movement. Now, as your right leg shortens, as it gets drawn a little bit towards your pelvis, you can again notice if your head were going to roll, what way, if you really listen, is it more likely to roll to the right? Is it more likely to roll to the left? And you might find that it rolls the same direction no matter which leg you shorten. This is a common thing that happens. Great. Now continue to shorten the right leg, but also pay attention to your left leg. When your right leg shortens into you, can you sense how your left leg gets a little bit longer? And could you begin to alternate now? You shorten your right leg once, and then you shorten your left leg. And this is very small. Again, it's like you just sense the bones are sliding within the tissues. One femur bone draws closer or deeper into you in the direction up towards your head, and then the other femur bone. And you feel that as one leg shortens, the other leg lengthens a little bit. You're welcome to actually place your hands on the front of your pelvis and feel the way that your pelvis is a part of this action as well.
Okay.
And you can play with keeping the movement very small, very quiet. But what happens if you go just a little bit faster? And you can notice the way that your head responds. Does the head respond by staying put, sticking glued to the back of the floor? Or does the head know that there's some movement going on lower in the body? Great. Okay, let that rest. Let it all go. You can bring your arms down. If you would like to stand your feet, bend your knees and stand your feet. If you're more comfortable with that, please do that. Now, notice the way that your two shoulders are resting, how they're engaged with the floor. And just feel this for yourself. If you were going to lift one shoulder a little bit forward, a little bit towards the ceiling, away from the floor, which shoulder would it be that you would lift forward away from the floor? And so just begin to lift this shoulder. Watch as you lift it. Listen to the sequence of the movement. The very first moment of the inspiration to move, the first moment of perceiving the activity of lifting. And so you stay with this shoulder that you chose, perhaps your nervous system chose because it's easier to lift. And you lift it a little bit forward, and then you settle it back to the floor, and you can pause before you repeat this action. And you can just continue slowly repeating this action as I guide you to listen to some specific things. You can actually notice the activity that it takes to overcome gravity in order to lift the shoulder. In other words, you overcome inertia and you watch yourself engaging yourself to lift this shoulder a little bit. How much muscular activity do you need to actually lift your shoulder? Yeah, and not to lift your hand, not to lift your elbow, but just your shoulder. Probably best to do this exploration with your arms on the floor, if that's comfortable. And start to find for yourself what the process is of engaging with the floor to make it possible to lift this shoulder. Do you stabilize something within yourself? Do you engage something with the floor so that your shoulder becomes free to lift? You can sense the tone by which you make yourself stable with the ground so that this shoulder can lift. How do your ribs participate? You can feel, how do I move my ribs in order to move my shoulder? And this might be a little elusive. That's okay. So you lift your shoulder, but you notice the way that your ribs move. You could even notice, do you engage your sacrum? Do you stabilize your pelvis? Do you roll your pelvis? Do you engage your pelvis with the floor in some way that makes it possible for you to lift this shoulder? And begin to notice, what way does your head move? How is your head engaged in the lifting of your shoulder? how early can you detect how your head will roll or participate in the movement? So you notice for yourself as you begin to lift your shoulder, if your head is rolling with the movement and in what direction. So yes, we're just working with this one shoulder for the moment. You chose the shoulder and you're making the movement over and over again, but you can pause between repetitions. We're repeating so that you sense the clarity of the movement, the first intention of lifting and how it connects into yourself. And if you want, you can make the movement a little bit larger, so you exaggerate it a little bit so that maybe it's more clear how it connects into yourself. And find for yourself, as you lift this shoulder, does your head roll away from the shoulder as if to look away from it? Or does your head roll towards the shoulder that's lifting as if to look towards it? So you find out how this movement connects within you. Whatever it is that you find out, can you continue the pattern that you're finding so that it's really clear to you? You either lift the shoulder and sense that the head and the face roll towards it, or you lift the shoulder and you sense that the head and the face roll away from it. Great. Leave this for a moment. Just pause for a moment and sense for yourself what this shifting of attention has done for your connection with yourself. And for just a few times, could you please lift the same shoulder, but move your head in the opposite direction you were moving? It means to make a new connection with yourself. So invite yourself to make this movement in a way that is not arbitrary. You actually take the time and listen to the way that this shoulder lifts and how you could alter the movement, alter the way that your ribs engage with the floor, the way that the spine engages with the floor, so that your head is invited to roll in the opposite way that it was. It's like you're waiting for the whole pattern to spread. It's different than you can turn your head in the other way. Everyone can do that. And you're listening to this different coordination in your spine. Great. Now continue lifting this same shoulder and turn your head one way as you lift it. And then you come back and you lift the same shoulder and you turn the head the other way. And you just watch the change that you make within yourself, the different way you engage the floor to make this movement. So you move your head one way, you turn your head one way as you lift the shoulder, and then you turn your head the other way as you lift the shoulder. You can notice how the ribs engage to make this movement of the head. Great. Now continue to lift this same shoulder, but for a moment find out how you could stabilize yourself in such a way that the back of your head remains absolutely still. The back of your head stays connected to the floor. But your shoulder can be very free, is freer and freer. So your shoulder lifts and lowers, but your head stays very still. Can the two be independent of each other for a moment? Wonderful. Great. Let that rest. Let everything rest. You can lengthen your legs. You could roll to your side if you wanted, if that would be more comfortable to rest for a moment. Great. And come back to your back. Let your arms be down at your side and sense the way that the two shoulders, the two sides of your back meet the floor.
Okay.
And begin to lift your other shoulder and watch within yourself. Watch very carefully how you begin to initiate lifting this shoulder. Listening to the beginning intention, the way you send the intention within yourself to engage your musculature to lift the shoulder, to overcome that inertia. And you listen how quickly you can sense what happens with your ribs. What has to roll into the floor to lift this shoulder? And in what direction is it that your head begins to roll? And again, perhaps to your surprise, some of you will find that your head wants to roll in the same direction that it wanted to roll when your other shoulder lifted. So just notice, because there's often something that can be found in the way that we organize ourselves with the ground that makes it so that we might want to roll the head in the same way. So lifting this shoulder and noticing the way your head rolls, the way it easily rolls. And then begin to roll the head in the other direction. So you lift the same shoulder, but you change the direction that the head rolls. And it's not forcing it. You're listening. Maybe it's a little movement of the eyes that changes the musculature in your neck and your upper chest that allows for a really free rolling of the head in that direction. As much as you can, you avoid making that movement just arbitrary. Good. And feel what it's like to alternate between the rolling of the head one way and the rolling of the head the other way. You keep lifting the same shoulder, and you are not in a rush. You find within yourself, if you can initiate the movement every single time from a new way of being connected with yourself, a new way of being connected with the floor, so that you never come from the same mechanical process over and over again. Because we are repeating movements, sometimes it can be easy to kind of get caught up in just mechanically doing the movement again and again. But there's this deliberate quality within yourself to stay attuned to attending to each new possibility, moment by moment.
Good.
Great. And then just lastly, this same shoulder will lift, but can your head remain quiet? Can it stay silent? You find a way to inhibit the movement of the head within yourself. Some kind of stability so that the head stays still, but you can still lift the shoulder. Good. Now make it so you can move your head in each of these three directions relative to the lifting of your shoulder. You can roll your head one way as you lift your shoulder. You can roll the head the other way. You could keep your head stable. Beautiful. Okay, pause for a moment. Rest, leave it for a moment. And just sense how you experience yourself, your relationship with the floor, with your breath. And now, could you start to lift one shoulder and lower it, and then lift the other shoulder? So you alternate. You lift one shoulder, you bring it down, and then you lift the other shoulder. And you observe as you do this, in what direction does your head want to roll? And again, you might notice that your head wants to roll always in the same way. That's definitely an outcome. Now, thinking about the shoulder girdle, the front of your chest, the back of your chest, so that as you lift your right shoulder, could you feel that your left shoulder is being pulled more underneath you, almost as though you're rolling like a tire or like a sphere, as though this area of your upper torso or your chest, it's like a globe that's rotating. And as you lift your right shoulder, your left scapula moves underneath you more, or towards your spine. And then as you lift your left shoulder towards the ceiling, your right shoulder moves, your right shoulder blade on the back of you, it draws into the floor as though it wants to kind of roll more underneath you. And so you have this sense that the shoulder that's being drawn into the floor, being drawn more underneath you, could actually be a support or initiate to help lift the opposite shoulder. And as you do this, notice now if it's more clear, a more clear action in your shoulder girdle for what direction your head would roll. So as you lift your right shoulder a little bit, your left shoulder blade rolls underneath you. It kind of scoops underneath you like it wants to scoop into the floor and towards your spine. And as you lift your right shoulder, your left shoulder blade engages and it scoops a little bit underneath you. And notice if the neck muscles can be very free, and you just start to find that your head is rolling. As you lift your left shoulder, your head rolls to the right. As you lift your right shoulder, your head rolls to the left. Notice how the back of you engages with the floor. Maybe now you could feel your sacrum move as well. Maybe your sacrum's shifting a little bit side to side. And if your legs are long, you could feel as you roll or turn your shoulders one way and then the other, which leg would shorten into you? If you bring your legs into the image of you now, can you sense this might be a very subtle thing and maybe it's hard to sense? So just be in the question as you lift one shoulder or as you turn your chest one way, which leg feels like it would shorten a little into you? Which leg would get longer? Great. Let that rest for a moment. Let it all go. Just sense now the symmetry of your connection to the floor, the availability to experience the right and left side of yourself. The right side of your back, the left side of your back. Exhale for a moment and just wait and pause in this space between the exhale and the inhale. Great. Now bend your knees and stand your feet. And sense the two sides of your pelvis. You could imagine, like, if you were wearing a pair of jeans that had these back pockets, there's two pockets touching the floor, one on the back of the right side of your pelvis, one on the back of the left side of your pelvis. Could you slowly start to lift one side of your pelvis? So the back pocket of one side begins to unweight. And then you bring it back to the floor. And you just do this slowly a few times with this same side. You sense for yourself what side of the pelvis might be easier to lift. You choose that side. And as you start to unweight this side of your pelvis, can you keep your two knees pointed at the ceiling so that your knee doesn't sway inward or outward? That's right. So you keep the foot on the floor, you keep your feet on the floor. You're just lifting this one side of your pelvis. Yeah, your knees are bent, your feet are standing. Good. Pause for a moment and now just switch. Lift the other side of your pelvis. You think of lifting the back pocket and the weight rolls. And you can notice as you do this, as you unweight the side of your pelvis, do you press with your feet? Do your feet get heavier? Do your feet stay weighted in the same way? Do you keep the feet connected to the floor without pushing? Just notice for yourself. Great. Now alternate. Lift one side of your pelvis, bring it down, and lift the other side of your pelvis. And again, notice, do you press with your feet? Do you press with a particular foot? And as you alternate, lifting one side of the pelvis and then the other side, could you allow your head to roll in the same way your pelvis is rolling? It means if you lift the left side of your pelvis, you're rolling your pelvis to the right and you allow your head to roll a little to the right. And as you lift the right side of your pelvis, your head rolls a little to the left. So you can imagine these two spheres on the two ends of your spine, and they're rolling together. And can you start to include your shoulders so that as the right side of your pelvis lifts, the right shoulder lifts a little bit. And as the left side of your pelvis lifts, the left shoulder lifts a little bit. And you could imagine it's not just the lifting of one side, but the other side rolls more underneath you, almost like a globe that's spinning right around its axis. So as you lift the right hip and the right shoulder, your left hip and your left shoulder get drawn or rolled more underneath you. You engage the floor differently. It's not like you're going to roll off to the side and actually roll off your mat. You're rolling underneath yourself. That's right. So everything's rolling to one side and then everything's rolling to the other side. Great. Let it go. Pause. Let your legs lengthen. Take a short little rest. Bend your knees and bring your feet to stand again. And slowly, quietly, again, begin to roll your pelvis one way. Lift one side of the pelvis and then the other side. But can you roll your head opposite of the pelvis? So as you lift the right side of the pelvis, the head gently turns a little to the right. And as you lift the left side of the pelvis, the head gently turns a little to the left. And you're not letting your knees rock side to side. If we keep the knees pointed more towards the ceiling, this action of taking one side of the pelvis up in relation to our femur bones is actually more similar to what happens in your pelvis with walking. So you want to think of keeping your two femur bones parallel with each other as one side of your pelvis lifts and then the other side. Beautiful, beautiful. Great, nice, easy breathing. Okay, pause. Keep your feet standing, but now bring both arms towards the ceiling. So your two arms are vertical, your hands can be relaxed. And slowly just elongate your right arm towards the ceiling so that your right shoulder lifts away from the floor. Let it turn your chest to the left so that your head rolls a little to the left. And then the right arm stays vertical, but you bring the right shoulder back to the floor. And now lift your left arm a little bit more towards the ceiling so that your left shoulder comes away from the floor and you feel the whole chest turning to the right, your head turning to the right. So you alternate this. You take one arm towards the ceiling, whichever arm is reaching towards the ceiling, you feel how that shoulder lifts. And your head, your face is turning away from the arm that's getting a little longer towards the ceiling. And feel how the back of you can engage with the floor. Like one side of you is rolling underneath yourself. One side's lifting, and the other side is trying to roll underneath yourself. Yeah, and if that's clear, you could play with it. You could play with the timing of it. You could make it a little bit quicker. The hands can be soft. Feeling how you could mobilize the chest. When the chest turns towards one hip and when the chest turns towards the other hip. Great. Okay, let that rest for a moment and bring your hands down. Keep your feet standing, and one more time, bring your arms back up to that position where they're vertical. So start this really slowly. As you lengthen the left arm towards the ceiling, as your left shoulder lifts, can you lift the right side of your pelvis? So you're lifting diagonal points. You bring them back down. Then you lift the right shoulder. You reach the right arm a little towards the ceiling as you lift the left hip. So playing with this coordination, as you lift the left shoulder, your head will roll to the right, but your right pelvis lifts. So we have the pelvis rolling or turning in one way, and the shoulder girdle and the head turning in the opposite way. Going slowly. If you start to get a little confused, just pause and reset. And listen to this coordination. It's a rotation. It's a twist in your spine. And you get to use the floor. You get to, whichever side is not lifting, you get to engage that area with the floor. Again, the hands can be soft. The forearm muscles can be soft. So we're very interested in how we can specifically organize the torso. And that's what will move your limbs. That's what will move your arms. Beautiful. Nice, easy breathing. And if you want, you could make it quicker if it's feeling comfortable, this pattern. You could sort of even imagine that you're walking quickly or like you're jogging. Great. Okay, let it all go. Rest. Bring your arms down. Bring your legs down.
Exactly.
Sense the way you lay with the floor now. Are there more surfaces available for you to move from? You know, we're always relating, we're moving relative to the surfaces that we touch. So move relative to the surface that you touch, the floor. Roll to your side, come up to sit, and from sitting, take your time to come up to stand. And you can, in standing, if you're comfortable with it, you can close your eyes. You can imagine this midline that runs all the way down to the floor between your heels. Noticing when you come here to stand, to find your balance in standing, over which foot do you find this more clear support? Does one foot feel closer to the midline? Has something changed, or is it the same? Is it even more clear how it was? Great. And then open your eyes and just shift yourself so that you step forward with your right foot and you just stay with your right foot forward. You have weight on both feet, but you might have a little more weight on your right foot. And feel, do you drop your weight into that foot, or do you lift yourself away from the floor in some way? Remember, we just spent a little time on this today, this idea that the leg was like a stick and it was sort of shortening into you when the leg was long. As you stand here with your right foot, as though you're sort of taking a step forward with the right foot, could you almost imagine that your right leg is a straw and you're kind of sucking the floor up through that straw, maybe through your arch? And as you do that, you can sense, do you get a little taller on your right leg, or do you sink into the floor? Now step forward with your left foot and stay there with your left foot forward and just explore this idea of your left leg being kind of drawn into you. You might like the sensation, you might not. Does it make you taller, or do you sink down as you do that? As you imagine that your left leg is almost like a straw that's able to vacuum up or suck up energy from the floor up through your leg. Great. And then step forward with your right foot as though you're taking this step, and you can notice, does your chest, do your eyes, do they turn towards this front standing leg, or do they turn away, or how do you organize over that leg? And then step again with your left, and you can maybe just start to move it into walking, not being so particular about it. But feeling how do your head and your chest organize towards the leg that steps forward. Yeah, if you have space to walk a little bit more quickly, freely, do you have a sense that your head is free to see right and left? Does it swivel or can it turn just naturally? And maybe the better question is, do you have some overall different sense of wholeness within yourself as you walk now? Great. Okay, thanks so much, everyone. So I'll end the movement lesson there. Are you enjoying this podcast? I've chosen to offer these audio recordings freely for over 15 years. I do this because research shows yoga, yoga nidra, and Feldenkrais to be valuable practices, those which I would like to share widely. Dana, the Buddhist practice of generosity, has always been a pillar of my business. And more generally, dana is the inclination to give without expecting any form of repayment. It does, however, take a fair amount of time, effort, and cost to maintain and keep the podcasts available. If you feel you've benefited from what you've learned from these classes, then please do consider making a contribution towards the maintenance and upkeep of the classes. It will help ensure that I can continue to offer the podcast classes freely and keep generating new material. Give what you can, give what feels good. If it's too little, it won't feel good. If it's too much, it won't feel good. Links to support the show monetarily can be found in the show notes. And other ways to give include sharing the podcast with others, leaving a 5-star rating and review, or just sending me an email with how the classes have affected you. Thanks so much.